that. We know that. And we also know about the crises that are unleashing in the world today. I just want to jump into what's possible because I think moments like this, it's really important to focus on what we do want to be. It's moments of change and moments of disruption when the possibility becomes real. So I take inspiration from Buckminster Fuller, a 20th century American inventor, genius. And he said, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." Of course, we have to fight the existing reality. And there are people who do a brilliant job of exposing corruption, of bringing down the old regime, of blocking it from dominating our lives, of course. But that alone won't get us to where we want to be. We need to be propositional. And I sometimes say that the best form of protest is to propose something new, and not just propose it, but prove it. Prove it in practice. Show me. Make it happen. And that's what I'm excited about. So I went to university in the 1990s. I studied economics because I wanted to learn the mother tongue of public policy, but I was really frustrated by what I was taught because the ideas didn't equip me even for the 1990s, let alone for the 21st century. And here we are, a quarter of the way through the 21st century. And one thing that makes me angry in my belly is knowing that students today who go to university to study economics are being taught such outdated ideas that it does not give them the chance they need to do what needs to happen in this century now. So I'm passionate about new economic thinking that actually equips young people and all of us with the ideas, with the mindset to actually bring about transformation. So I read after university, long after university, I read lots of economics that I was never taught. Ecological economics, feminist economics. Ooh, happy laughing owl. You can enjoy the owl. I read lots of economics that I was never taught. Ecological, feminist, behavioral, complexity, and there are amazing ideas there. And I thought, what happens if we make these ideas dance together on the same page? And so I brought them together in one book. I called it Doughnut Economics. But here on this side, I mean, if you want to know the gist of the book in a summary in one page, that's it. There are 7 old ways of thinking, and I propose 7 new ways. Again, the best form of protest is to propose something new. Okay, not that, but this. And also really important for me is that it's about ways of thinking. It's not the policies. It's not, my book is not a list of policies and what to do. It's ways of thinking, because I believe that if we have those ways of thinking, then people in a place, in a context, will come up with good policies for that place, for that time, because of course they're going to differ all over the world. So this is the outline, and I'm going to touch on some of these ideas today, just to share a bit of the theory with you, but also the practice, what happens when people start putting this into practice, and also what happens when we feel like we're getting stuck, which we might feel now. So 3 stages, some theory, some practice, some motivation for when we feel stuck. So I'm going to start with the donut itself. Whoop, here we are. The goal, what are we trying to aim for? What would success look like? I drew it, it looks like a donut. It's the one donut that turns out to be good for us. You don't need to eat donuts. The best ones are conceptual. If you think of humanity's use of Earth's resources radiating out from the center of the picture, the hole in the middle is a place where people are falling short on the essentials of life. People do not have the resources that every person has a claim to meet their essential needs. And I crowdsource these. It's getting stuck. I crowdsource these from the system. Oh, are you clicking for me? Yes, of course. I'll have a brief pause. A brief pause. People, please don't eat donuts. They're not good for you, really. They're too sugary. It's only called the donut because of the shape. And when I was calling it the donut, I thought maybe I should call it the life belt. But my American colleague said, "What do you mean life belt? You mean lifesaver?" And Europeans said, "Oh, you mean life ring?" And nobody knew what I meant. Everyone said, "Do you mean the donut?" So you might love donuts, you might hate donuts, but at least you know what I'm talking about. And when we call economics Doughnut Economics, everybody knows it's a bit playful. This is not intimidating. So everybody feels a bit invited to the story. So the hole in the middle, people are falling short on life's essentials. It's not. So it means that and I crowdsourced these from the Sustainable Development Goals. Oh, that's not even working either. The system is very, very resistant to change, you see. It happens everywhere. We've got to keep going through the resistance. So I'll go quickly on this one. Don't leave people falling short on life's essentials, and these come from the Sustainable Development Goals. The reason I crowdsourced the social foundation from the Sustainable Development Goals is because the governments of the world have already agreed that every person has a right. So the world's governments have already agreed to this. It can't be controversial. But at the same time, we don't want to leave people below the social foundation. We also can't overshoot that ecological ceiling. And that's made up of the 9 planetary boundaries that Earth system scientists recognized in 2009, the life-supporting systems that make life work on planet Earth, that give us a stable climate and healthy soils and healthy oceans and abundant biodiversity and a recharging fresh water cycle and a protective ozone layer overhead. So the boundaries of the donut are to leave no one in the hole, but don't overshoot Earth's limits. Here we go. The Sustainable Development Goals. Leave no one in the hole, but don't overshoot the limits of the planet. And between these 2 sets of boundaries is the green space where we can seek to thrive. Dirk tells me there is no single word for this in your language. So for me, thriving has become a really valuable word in English because it's not about endlessly growing. Something's thriving. Often when your children go to university or go to college or start out as a young adult, people say, oh, they're really thriving. They're not growing, but they're somehow developing in many ways. But it's not about getting bigger. It's about thriving. It's alive. I think this plant is thriving. It's thriving. It's flowering. So the goal is to thrive in the donut. Very different shape from endless growth, which goes like this. Whoosh. Thriving is between the boundaries. It's like a heartbeat. We know this in our own bodies. We're thriving, we're healthy, we're in balance. And this is about finding a balance not just for the human body, but for the planetary body. Trouble is, we are very far from that right now. And this is an update that we recently published in Nature, which is fantastically valuable because it's a very well-known, highly respected journal. The donut is now published in Nature. It gives us a lot of credibility amongst scientists and academics. It's there as a reference. We updated it, and you can see massive human shortfall globally, billions of people falling short. All of that red shows the extent to which people are falling short on life's essentials. And we are massive overshoot of the planet's boundaries. So this is a double whammy challenge. And last century's economic theories were not designed to solve this. We should not expect that they will. Last century's government policies, last century's urban designs, last century's business models, last century's lifestyle aspirations, none of them were designed to turn this story around. We need to reinvent from here. Having seen this, we need to reinvent. So what do we do? How do we think? What kind of policies do we put into place? Because this is where we begin. This is the same story told over 20 years, from 2000 to 2022. We've unrolled the donut. We call this the baguette. We are quite into food. We call this the baguette, but it's the same data. And what you can see on the bottom is how changes in the social foundation over those 22 years and changes in the ecological ceiling on the top. So on the bottom, these ones have got better. The pale pink, these are improvements. And there have been some significant improvements in reducing human deprivation. Not enough, not across all of them, but there's been some. But at the same time, many are only incrementally improving or even getting worse. So the improvements of human deprivation are very mixed. But on the ecological ceiling, only one has improved, the ozone layer depletion. We've tackled the ozone layer, the gap in the hole in the ozone layer. This is a really important good news story to show that we can turn around ecological degradation. But the story on most of them is still getting worse. So we haven't yet learned, we haven't yet put in place systems that are bringing us into the donut from both sides at the same time. We need to do that. Here we are, 3 country clusters. We gathered the data, the poorest 40%, the middle 40%, the richest 20% of countries. This would be no surprise to us. I could have asked you what this would look like, and I bet you'd fill this in. The poorest 40% of countries, it's a story of human deprivation, and they're not overshooting their share of planetary boundaries hardly at all. The middle countries, a double whammy challenge, both shortfall and overshoot. And then the richest countries, still some human deprivation, because many high-income countries have huge inequalities. And so we allow poverty and deprivation in our own nations, but it's really significant ecological overshoot. So let's go to some example countries. And if our friends in Croatia, if you want to look up Croatia, you can on this goodlife.leeds.act.uk. You'll see Croatia's national donut. Again, we see Malawi, massive human shortfall, no overshoot. China, double whammy challenge. I've put Belgium here today. A tiny bit of deprivation still, some significant ecological overshoot. And then the United States on a really high income per person, high inequality, and that shows up as poverty around the country, and massive ecological overshoot. And this ecological overshoot is measured on a consumption basis. So it's measured in terms of all the carbon and water and materials that are imported or embedded in the clothing, the electronics, the food, the materials that are imported into the country. Let's put this on a scatter plot. The place where every nation should aim to be is in the top left-hand corner. That's where a nation rises up to meet the needs of its people, but also comes back within the means of the living planet. So every country should aim for that. So first of all, we notice no single country is there. And I take out of my language the idea of developed countries. If you hear yourself talking about developed countries, or somebody says to you, well, the developed countries, you can say, where do you mean? Which country do you mean? Because there's not a single country here that should call itself developed. There's nothing developed about overshooting planetary boundaries. The country that's closer than any other is Costa Rica. So this is a real reordering of what we think success looks like. There's the 4 countries that I just showed you a moment ago: Malawi, China, Belgium, the United States. Croatia would be somewhere between Thailand and Ukraine, so a little bit below Belgium on that map. And let's recognize that although these countries look like separate dots, we're profoundly interconnected. I can say this to my Belgian friends from the UK, right? Colonialism. We have deep histories in this, and they have a long tail of influence today. But also corporate and military power, which is profoundly dominant today in the world's geopolitics right now. The resource extraction, the trade and finance rules, the ongoing impacts of climate and ecological breakdown, histories and long tails into the future. So countries are profoundly interconnected in how we go about this journey. So the history of pursuing growth, just going for GDP growth, generally takes countries in this direction, straight past the donut. It hasn't worked. It wasn't designed for this. In fact, you can see the tails of countries between 1992 and 2015. This is the direction the nations go in. Even those closest to the donut are still trending past it. We haven't yet started heading towards it. And in the words of Donella Meadows, one of the mothers of systems thinking, she said, when anyone calls for more growth, always ask growth of what and why and for whom and who pays the cost and how long can it last and what's the cost to the planet and how much is enough. So can we reorient ourselves? Can we actually start aiming for low-income countries to rise up without going into overshoot like all before them? Middle-income countries to meet the needs and come back within the planet's means at the same time? And high-income nations like yours, like mine, like all high-income countries to massively reduce that ecological overshoot and finally meet the needs of all of our people? We surely have the resources to do that. And this is going to call for a rebalancing between nations. Rebalancing can take many, many forms, and many people, if you listen to the international conversation, are calling for many different kinds of rebalancing. It might be reparations, return of stolen land, redistribution of wealth or technology, rebalancing of voice in international institutions. So for me, this is like a top-level map of the direction that we need the world to go in, and we can listen and look at global events and policies, local and global, and ask, is it taking us towards this or away? And what kind of mindset would give us a chance of actually moving towards this? How could we begin to get there? I think we need to replace our obsession with growth with 2 other dynamics. The first is that we've inherited linear degenerative economies that are running down Earth's life support systems, take, make, use, lose, the throwaway economy. We need to become regenerative and circular or cyclical by design. And just a few examples of this from the world of urban regeneration, moving in that direction. So retrofitting housing, right? Often people now say the best kind of building is the one that already exists. What are you going to do with it? Retrofit it. And the resources that have already been brought to this part of the world, we have all the materials and everything. Stop bringing in more. Work with what we've got. We've accumulated so much. Eco-construction here in India, this house is made of natural materials. When the house eventually crumbles or is disassembled, the materials literally will return to the earth. A sponge city that recognizes it's part of nature's floodplain and absorbs that water. And I didn't need to bring any bicycles to you here, but you know this, right? Public transport, reinventing, redesigning so that we are low carbon and smart in the way we travel. Just some examples of many, many, many examples we could bring about what it looks like to have a more regenerative system of urban design. But also, at the same time as being far more regenerative, we need to recognize we've inherited divisive economies that capture value and opportunity in the hands of a few. We're seeing the rise of the 1% supercharged by the techno networks and the tech bros now. And there's absolutely no chance of getting into the donut in such an unequal world where 1% of the world owns half the world's wealth. We need far more distributive economies that share that value with all who co-create it. From the local, from literally, you could take just the streets around us, how can this be more distributive by design, to the global scale. And again, some examples from urban regeneration, whether it's social housing in Vienna. Over 60% of people in this very elegant European city live in what we would call social housing. It's owned by the city or city-owned co-ops because they recognized over 100 years ago that housing should not be a wealth asset for the rich to speculate. It's a human right for all. So they decided to own the city's housing to respect it as a right. Community wealth building, using anchor institutions to purchase locally and create a rich local decentralized economy, community ownership of energy. And when the new jobs come, who's going to get access to those jobs? Is it going to be those who've already had opportunity, or as they did in Cleveland, Ohio, make sure that the historically marginalized communities get access to the new high skill? Again, these are just four of many possible examples of more distributive design, sharing value and opportunity with everybody. And to do that, we need to recognize that our economies are not just about the market and the state, a very 20th century conception. And I was only taught in my economics degrees 4 years about the market, free market, laissez-faire economics, or state-loving socialism. Which one are you for? Choose. And this boxing match meant we lost sight both of the household, of the unpaid care and work, where we begin every day caring for our children and our partners and ourselves and our parents, but also of the commons, where we come together and co-create and provision together. And I think a renaissance of this era must be to rediscover the power and the potential of the commons, especially now we have digital tools for the commons, to bring back that potential, but also always to recognize the centrality of the household and respect that space for care in the home. So I'm going to pull out now, that's theory on the pages of a book. And my book came out in 2017. And my goal was to try and change the curriculum in universities. That's what I was writing with an intention towards. It's influenced lots of curriculums in many different university departments, probably least of all in the economics department. There's a lot of resistance. But what happened next blew me away, and I didn't expect it at all, that people in government, in businesses, in communities, in towns, schools started saying, oh, we love these ideas and we're going to put them into practice. I'm already doing this. I've invented a game. I'm doing this in my town. I've got it in my boardroom. I'm bringing it in my classroom. I was amazed. And I realized I needed to set up an organization to bring together these pioneers to learn from each other. So I co-founded Doughnut Economics Action Lab. It's all about action, working with those who are in action. And it's a lab because it's one big experiment of how can we start putting these ideas into practice and how do we learn together? And I'm going to share with you what's been happening in places and how people are putting these ideas into practice in a place. So the city of Amsterdam was the first to say we're going to put the donut at the heart of our circularity policy, and we want to aim for this city to live in the donut. And 6 weeks later, the city of Copenhagen voted, well, we're going to explore what it means here. And I learned very quickly the power of peer-to-peer inspiration. When one place begins, another gets inspiration. Then there was Barcelona, then there was Brussels. And I literally thought, is this going to be alphabetical? But they soon broke out. And today there are more than 50 cities, towns, districts, states, regions that have publicly placed the concept of doughnut economics at the heart of their policies. There's another 50 who are experimenting behind the scenes, but these ones have all gone public. And I just want to share with you a few examples of what they're doing in practice. So Amsterdam was the first. They created this Dutch orange version of the donut and came up with this statement. We want Amsterdam to be a thriving, inclusive, regenerative city for all residents while respecting the planetary boundaries. And that was the first city that said something like this. And I thought, I would love to live in a place that had this goal. Once you change that goal, a lot needs to change behind it. They began to experiment with the circularity. So it was at the heart of their circularity strategy in housing, in clothing, in food, bring it into these sectors. How do we design differently when we are aiming both to meet people's essentials needs and reduce our carbon footprint, reduce our material footprint? And this drives you towards circularity. You're going to have to do things differently if you're respecting both of these boundaries. You're going to have to find a creativity in the middle. Something really good that happened in Amsterdam at the same time was a group of civic organizers and pioneers came together and they said, we're going to create the Amsterdam Doughnut Coalition. They just invented this idea, launched it in 2019 at the same time, a community-led initiative. They hold these donut deal days. They hold pioneering events. They make it very playful, gorgeous, irresistible. And the value of having both a city politician and then city level civil servants and the community, these three layers, sometimes in tension, sometimes resisting each other and frustrated, but all of them moving. It means the concept gets sticky and it stays and it takes traction and it's building over time. So it's still alive 6, 7 years on. There've been elections and there's overturn of who's in power, but still the idea is alive because it's held by all these different groups. In Grenoble in France, they took the concept in 2022. Grenoble was the European Green Capital. And they said a child born this year will be 18 in 2040. And by 2040, this should be a city that's well on the way to living in the donut. So they've set themselves this longer term goal. And as you can see, they've written a beautiful report about it, introducing it to the residents of the place. So changing the mindset of everybody. And I think there's something valuable that Grenoble is a city. You can see the photograph at the top. It's surrounded by mountains. So it's literally a city that's boundaried by mountains. I wonder if there is something in the local mentality. There are already natural boundaries here. We can draw on that and think about creating economic boundaries for ourselves. So changing the way that policies are made in the city, changing the way that they judge how to spend the budget of the city. The vice mayor of Grenoble, he said to me, I am eco-Marxist. It makes sense to me. Right? The donut comes along. It's not a completely new idea. He's already eco, he's already Marxist, so he's social, ecological. This picture, it speaks to what I already believe. It's like putting up a sail on your boat. It will catch the wind and take you further, faster towards where you already want to go. So I think many places are choosing it for that reason. It takes us where we already wanted to go. We've not seen the picture before. And now we've got a name for it and we belong to a bigger community. Not just in Europe. It's also picking up in other places, which is exciting to me to see how it gets adapted. So Ipoh in Malaysia, a pioneer there said, I want to do this in Malaysia. I'm going to bring this to a middle income country. How does it happen there? What is the Malaysian way of doing doughnut economics? How do we reinterpret it for our region? And in the same way that Amsterdam inspired its European neighbors, now Ipoh is being watched by its Malaysian and Southeast Asian neighbors. Will we pick this up and run with it too? Pioneering it there, but also in Bhutan. a country known for gross national happiness. The king, many years ago, said, we're not pursuing GDP, we're pursuing gross national happiness. The government of Bhutan got in touch. The king said to me, I read Doughnut Economics in one sitting. I don't quite believe him, but he was very keen. And he said, of everything I've seen coming out of Western economics, this makes sense. This is close to gross national happiness. So we want to use it together with our own concept in redesigning the future of the capital city, Thimphu. So they're using these together. I'm very obviously honored that Doughnut Economics is helping bridge into Bhutanese mindset. Can it help us bridge between the Western and the indigenous both ways? If you're interested in these examples and more, my colleague Leonora, who is our cities lead, she wrote this report drawing on all the experience from the cities, what we're learning. How are they getting started? What are the different routes in? Some very light routes in, some very profound routes in, and there's case studies written up here. So I find these very inspiring. She's continually holding webinars, inviting these policymakers to tell their stories. And again, the thing I've learned about spreading this work is the power of peer-to-peer inspiration. I can stand on a stage and go on a podcast. Wouldn't it be interesting if a city tried to put Doughnut Economics into practice? It's completely different when the mayor or the councillor or the vice mayor, the deputy mayor of a city says, well, of course we're using this because we want to transform for the future. This makes sense. We're just putting it into practice. It comes from a different place. And other mayors and councillors will listen completely differently. So we amplify the voices of those who are already doing it because we know they are the influencers to others like them. But, and some also community groups are doing it. So I focused on local governments. These are community groups around the world, or individuals who, inspired by the Amsterdam Doughnut Coalition, say, we're going to do that too. We're going to make our own group. One was in Melbourne. They're an organization called Regen Melbourne, born out of crisis. Melbourne had wildfires that devastated much of the city. Then they had COVID like everybody else. Then they had more wildfires. People came together and said, this is not a life. We have to have some different kind of future. We can't lurch from crisis to crisis to crisis. Let's envision what we want to become. So they placed the doughnut at the center of their vision. And now we're imagining a swimmable river. That picture at the top is Photoshop. They are dreaming of a river that they can swim in the middle of their city. But these dreams carry them towards that goal. They're doing brilliant work in Melbourne, bringing together a huge array of allies, unusual allies to envision this. But also I want to mention a place close to me, Birmingham in the UK. In one neighborhood, quite a deprived neighborhood in the city, people have gathered together, going street by street, door by door. Can we retrofit the street? Can we mobilize people in this neighborhood? So taking it to a very local scale. And as you can see, in a really playful way. And what excites me about the community work is just how playful people are being. The creativity that people bring to this. Again, many people are intimidated by economics, but when you stick the word donut in front of it, they know it's playful. I can make a game, I can do graffiti, I can dance the donut, I can hold a party, I can write a newspaper, I can invite the kids. And it makes it much more politically inclusive because everybody feels welcomed to this conversation. So that's all great, but what if we feel we're getting stuck? Because behind every one of these stories that I can show you with beautiful photographs are people who are frustrated, finding it hard, exhausted sometimes, wondering if we'll ever get there. So let's just lean into that because we can all feel that today. What if we feel we're getting stuck? We're all aiming in these different ways to get towards the donut, but policies and global politics and regulations and budgets get in the way. There's institutional inertia, geopolitical pressures, burnout, lack of funding, crises, they get in the way. And then along comes a journalist, calls me up. Oh, I want to go to a place that's living in the donut. Where can I go? Like as if it's just magically going to be there. They say, show me the results you've already achieved. Where is it? I want to see it in the street. Like as if this stuff should just be instantly be visible. You know, how can you prove to me this new economy is going to work? How can you prove to me these policies are actually going to work? The burden is put on us to prove the new possibility, even though we can see that this one is clearly failing. And why is it taking so long? So how do we respond to this? And I take inspiration from previous decades, previous generations who have fought long for transformation. And I want to share some of that with you. So we're not the first to try to transform the economy. Back in 1947, Milton Friedman, the bad boy of neoliberalism, and Friedrich Hayek, another bad boy of neoliberalism, got together in a little Swiss hotel called Mont Pelerin. And they came up because they had a dream. They had a dream about a new kind of economics, neoliberalism. This was their imagination. The world was dominated by Keynesian economics, managing the government and governmental spending. They thought that this would lead to beyond socialism, to communism, to authoritarianism. So they were pushing back with their vision of neoliberalism. And Friedman said, only a crisis, actual or perceived, produces real change. And when that crisis occurs, the actions that are taken depend on the ideas that are lying around. That, I believe, is our basic function, to develop alternatives to existing policies, to keep them alive and available until the politically impossible becomes the politically inevitable. We must take so much courage and hope from that. Milton Friedman thought that neoliberalism was the politically impossible. Today, we find it hard to imagine that there could be anything else. So we have to be as bold as him and develop alternatives to existing policies to keep them alive and available until the moment arises. And I believe that's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. We are keeping these alive and possible. And crises, my God, the crises are coming. And people are more and more turning, like they did in Melbourne. What other way is possible then? This is not fun. This is not good. We feel insecure. We feel vulnerable. What else can we stand for? Where can we build resilience from? I believe these moments are coming. They built a whole network of powerful think tanks. They got professors in universities and paid them for permanent chairs to put out these ideas to make them sound not only academic, but inevitable. So we may not have the money behind us for that, but what if we could not have these ideas just lying around? Let's have them up and running in practice. So for me, part of the strategy of Doughnut Economics Action Lab is just to say, oh, look, here are some policymakers. Some of them are very sensible civil servants in Malaysia and in Copenhagen, in Amsterdam and in Chile, and they're just getting on with it. They've chosen this. Nobody's paying them. They just chose this because it makes sense. To me, this is very powerful persuasion of this other possibility. Let me turn to Howard Zinn, an incredible American historian, who said the leaps that man has made in social evolution came from those who acted as if they knew they would win, or as if they'd already won, as if they were living in the future that they're trying to create. And we can all think of examples for that. For me, the first example that comes to my mind as an English woman are the suffragettes who fought for the right to vote. These elegant women being carried off by police, being jailed. And they said, we are not coming here as lawbreakers. We are coming here as lawmakers. And they knew that they were on the right side of history. At the time, they were seen as really troublesome, dangerous. They were firebombing letterboxes. They were dangerous. They weren't polite. They were more dangerous than Extinction Rebellion, than Just Stop Oil. They were more inconvenient than the traffic. These are the people who are on the walls of the schools. When you go in any school in England, the suffragettes are on the wall. They're the heroes. At the time, they were reviled. People were, these women. Well, now they're the heroes. Likewise, Gandhi. What a troublesome man. What a troublesome man to the British Empire. But his dignity, in his simplicity, and you can just see it in him, like, I'm going on the salt march. We're going to go and make some salt. Hello, British Empire, watch me make salt. He just knew that he was going to win, that he was going to get the Brits out of India. The dignity with which he held himself, he acted as if he knew that that end was coming. These men who dared to sit in a counter in the US and face the real severe violence and hatred because of their color, knowing that the arc of justice is long, right? The arc of history is long, but it bends towards justice, as Martin Luther King said. So people who dared to act as if. So how do we act as if we know that this different kind of economy, this regenerative, distributive economy is going to come through? We are going to escape from the tyranny that we are in now. How would we act as if? What does that mean to do that today and act as if we know we will succeed? I'm going to turn to Shirley Chisholm, the first Black woman to be elected to US Congress. So she knows a thing or two about breaking through barriers. And she said, if they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. How do you bring a folding chair? How do we bring a folding chair? We can bring folding chairs by holding our own festivals, writing our own newspapers, running our own podcasts, running our own courses. If you don't make it into the university, set up a better one outside and make it irresistible. Make it the better party. Make it the place that you want to be. Lastly, let me bring Ilya Prigogine, the Nobel laureate in chemistry, who said, when a complex system is far from equilibrium, small islands of coherence in a sea of chaos have the capacity to shift the entire system to a higher order. So how do we join up these small islands? I speak of Doughnut Economics, but I always will say, and look to well-being economy, look to economy for the common good, look to buen vivir, look to many. It's not about the one. We say, don't try to be the movement, join the movement. You're part of something much bigger than yourself. Join up your island with others. Celebrate the work of others. Don't compete with them, because that's the fastest way to undermine our own capacity. So for me, these are some of the ways that I hold my motivation. And I find it in the work of others around me that we keep doing this together. We keep building on each other's work. So I come back here to that map that I offered you. How do we reorient ourselves? Through new ways of thinking, through practice, and through taking inspiration from others in the past who've tried to redirect the world equally ambitiously in a direction it seems impossible. But as Milton Friedman said, the political impossible becomes the politically inevitable. How do we take opportunity of the moment of crisis in the world, and my goodness, they're coming, to start turning our worlds this direction, from the very local towards the global? So let me leave it there. If you're interested in the ideas of Doughnut Economics, we welcome you to browse the platform, to become a member, to use the tools, to contribute your tools. This is the work of many. I will stop there. Thank you very much indeed.